Have you ever felt unseen? Like your greatest contributions were invisible, your deepest knowledge dismissed, your very worth overshadowed by flash and surface-level appeal? Imagine dedicating your life, every waking hour, every ingenious thought, to building something profound, only to have it snatched away, not by a competitor, but by the very people you considered family. This is the story of Sabine Lehman, a woman whose brilliance was underestimated, whose loyalty was betrayed, and whose quiet strength ignited a firestorm that reshaped an entire industry. Her journey is a stark reminder that true power isn't granted, it's earned, and often, it emerges from the deepest shadows of despair. Sabine Lehman moved through the cavernous warehouses of Lehman Logistics like a silent conductor, orchestrating a symphony of movement that few truly understood. At 41, every line on her face, every calloused finger, told a story of dedication etched into the very fabric of the company her grandfather founded. From the bustling ports of Hamburg to the intricate networks spanning continents, Sabine knew every last detail, every potential bottleneck, every hidden efficiency. She was the logistics genius, the quiet architect behind the seamless flow of goods that made Lehman Logistics a titan in its field. While her father, the aging CEO, enjoyed the accolades, it was Sabine who spent countless nights hunched over schematics, optimizing routes, predicting market shifts, and solving problems before they even surfaced. She didn't crave the spotlight. She simply yearned for the satisfaction of a perfectly executed plan, the hum of efficiency that resonated deep within her soul. Her office, austere and functional, was a testament to her priorities. A large map dominated one wall, covered in countless pins and strings, a living testament to the intricate web she wove daily. She'd joined the company straight out of university, foregoing the glittering promises of other industries to dedicate herself to the legacy that ran in her blood. She knew the company from the ground up, having worked every role, understood every challenge from the truck driver's seat to the shipping manifest. Her colleagues, the few who truly saw past her reserved demeanor, respected her with an almost reverential awe, witnessing firsthand the quiet miracles she performed daily. Yet the broader corporate world, particularly the distant board members, knew her mostly as Lehman's daughter or the operations manager, a title that barely scratched the surface of her profound impact. As her father's retirement loomed, an unspoken assumption hung in the air. Sabine would naturally step into the CEO role. It was the only logical progression, the only just outcome. She had built this, shaped it, breathed life into its very machinery. The company was her meticulously crafted extension, a testament to her unseen genius. Her father, a man of tradition, often spoke of passing the torch, and Sabine, in her quiet way, had always prepared for that moment, not with ambition for power, but with a deep-seated responsibility to the thousands of lives that depended on Lehman Logistics. She carried the weight of her family's legacy, a burden she embraced with profound seriousness, knowing that her vision and unwavering commitment had sustained them for decades. She was ready, not just in skill, but in spirit, to lead them into the next chapter, believing, truly believing, that her work would speak for itself. The world, however, had a different plan, one that valued optics over genuine contribution, a painful lesson she was about to learn with devastating clarity. The polished mahogany table of the Lehman Logistics boardroom gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, reflecting the tense silence that had fallen over the assembly of stern faces. Sabine sat, her posture straight, her hands clasped loosely in front of her, a quiet anticipation humming beneath her calm exterior. Her father, a man whose presence usually filled any room, cleared his throat, his voice cracking slightly as he formally announced his retirement. A ripple of polite applause followed, but Sabine barely noticed, her gaze fixed on the empty chair at the head of the table, the one she felt destined to fill. The board chairman, a man whose conservative suit seemed to perfectly match his even more conservative mindset, then rose, his voice devoid of warmth as he began to speak of the company's future. He spoke of modernization, of reaching new demographics, of brand visibility in the digital age. Sabine's brow furrowed slightly. These were buzzwords she seldom used, concepts she understood but never prioritized over tangible efficiency. Then came the words that would shatter her world, delivered with a detached formality that amplified their cruelty. Therefore, after careful consideration, the board has decided to appoint Miss Alexa Richter as the new Chief Executive Officer of Lehman Logistics. The name hung in the air, a discordant note in the symphony of her expectations. Alexa Richter. Not Sabine Lehman. Her niece. Her 20-something niece, whose primary contribution to the family name had been a wildly successful fashion blog and a string of sponsored posts. Alexa, who had never stepped foot in a warehouse, never understood a bill of lading, never spent a single day grappling with the intricacies of global supply chains. A choked gasp escaped Sabine's lips, quickly suppressed. A wave of ice washed over her, followed by a burning flush of humiliation. She felt every pair of eyes in the room, some pitying, some dismissive, all witnessing her public, agonizing defeat. Alexa, perched at the end of the table, offered a saccharine smile, her perfect hair and designer suit a stark contrast to Sabine's functional, unadorned attire. "I am so incredibly honored," Alexa chirped, her voice resonating with an artificial enthusiasm that grated on Sabine's raw nerves. "I truly believe my vision for contemporary branding and direct consumer engagement will propel Lehman Logistics into an exciting new era." Sabine could barely breathe. The injustice was a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. This wasn't just a missed promotion, it was a profound invalidation of her entire life's work, a searing indictment of her quiet dedication. The board, those distant, unseeing figures, had chosen flash over substance, image over unparalleled competence. They had chosen a figurehead, an empty suit, over the very engine that drove their success. Sabine rose slowly, her movements deliberate, her eyes burning with an intensity that few had ever seen. She didn't speak, for words would only diminish the profound agony she felt. She simply walked out, leaving behind the gleaming table, the smiling niece, and the utterly indifferent faces of the men who had just dismantled her world. The silence of the corridor was deafening, mirroring the emptiness that had suddenly opened within her. The company, her lifeblood, had rejected her. The city of Hamburg, once a source of pride and purpose, now felt like a cold, indifferent giant, its familiar streets mocking Sabine with memories of a life that no longer felt like her own. After the boardroom humiliation, she had simply vanished. No dramatic resignation letter, no tearful farewells. She had collected her few personal effects from her office, the worn logistical handbooks, a faded photograph of her grandparents, a small, intricate model of a cargo ship, and simply walked away. The days that followed were a blur of disorientation and despair. She spent hours staring out her apartment window, watching the ships glide across the Elbe, each one a painful reminder of the empire she had helped build. Now commandeered by someone who knew nothing of its intricate mechanisms. The once vibrant hum of her logistical mind fell silent, replaced by a suffocating emptiness. Sleep offered no escape, only restless dreams of algorithms gone wrong, of containers lost at sea, echoing the profound sense of loss that consumed her. She felt like a phantom, a ghost haunting the edges of a world she once commanded. Her phone, once a constant lifeline of urgent calls and strategic updates, lay dormant. She ignored messages from concerned colleagues who dared to reach out, pitying glances she couldn't bear to face. Her identity, so inextricably linked to Lehman Logistics, had been brutally severed, leaving her adrift in a sea of worthlessness. The humiliation festered, a poison in her veins. Every news article celebrating Alexa's dynamic new vision felt like a fresh stab, every social media post of Alexa posing in front of a shiny new truck fleet, a twisted mockery. People talked about brand synergy and digital transformation, terms that felt utterly hollow compared to the tangible reality of moving goods, of connecting economies. Sabine, who had moved mountains of freight with precision and foresight, was now moving nothing but her own heavy limbs, burdened by the weight of her perceived failure. She walked the city streets, hoodie pulled low, an anonymous figure amidst the bustling crowds, observing, listening, without being seen. She saw the familiar Lehman Logistics trucks, now emblazoned with Alexa's grinning face in new advertising campaigns, and a sharp pang of resentment would pierce her. But amidst the pain, something began to stir, a tiny ember of an idea. She started noticing the cracks in the industry, the vulnerabilities, the areas where efficiency faltered. She observed Thorne Global Logistics, Lehman's long-standing competitor, a solid but somewhat complacent entity. They were reliable, but lacked the cutting-edge innovation Sabine had secretly developed for Lehman. An insidious thought, sharp and clear, began to form in the quiet corners of her shattered mind. The despair that had threatened to drown her now began to morph into something else, a cold, hard resolve. She had been cast out, her worth denied. But what if that very denial was a catalyst? What if her unique perspective, now untethered, could become a weapon? The thought was unsettling, even a little terrifying, but it was also the first spark of purpose she had felt in months. The world might have dismissed her, but she was far from finished. The logistical genius, once sidelined, was about to resurface, not as a whisper, but as a roar. The sting of her personal exile fueled a quiet, relentless study. Sabine, no longer bound by the internal politics of Lehman Logistics, began to see the global shipping industry with a clarity she'd never fully possessed before. She haunted quiet cafes, her laptop screen a glowing portal to market reports, competitor analyses, and global trade data. She meticulously tracked the movements of every major player, particularly Thorne Global Logistics. Elias Thorne, the long-standing CEO of Thorne Global, was a figure Sabine respected. He was a traditionalist, a man who built his company on solid principles, but he was also known for his cautious approach, his reluctance to embrace radical change. He ran a tight ship, but it was a ship sailing steadily, not accelerating. Sabine saw the potential, the untapped power within Thorne Global Logistics, if only someone were daring enough to unlock it. She recognized that while Lehman Logistics was descending into an influencer-driven spectacle under Alexa, Thorne Global remained a sleeping giant, formidable but slow to adapt. Sabine started compiling mountains of data, creating complex predictive models that identified every weakness in Lehman's new, superficial strategy and every opportunity for a more agile competitor. She saw how Alexa's focus on brand experience was creating internal chaos, delaying shipments, and eroding the foundational efficiency Sabine had painstakingly built. She meticulously documented the emerging logistical nightmares at her former company, the rising costs, the missed deadlines, the growing customer dissatisfaction that Alexa's perfectly curated social media facade couldn't hide forever. Sabine realized that Thorne Global Logistics, despite its size, suffered from a lack of fresh perspective, a generational inertia. Their systems were robust but outdated, their processes solid but not optimized for the rapid shifts of the modern market. She imagined the possibilities, merging Thorne's existing infrastructure with her innovative, cutting-edge solutions, creating a truly unstoppable force. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about demonstrating what true logistical excellence looked like, about proving that integrity and deep expertise ultimately triumphed over superficiality. The idea began to consume her, replacing the hollowness with a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just observing, she was planning. She wasn't just charting data, she was charting a new destiny. She needed an entry point, a way to present her audacious vision to Thorne, a man who, she knew, valued competence above all else. She understood his cautious nature and knew a simple plea wouldn't work. She needed to present an undeniable case, backed by irrefutable data and an unshakable conviction. Her humiliation had transformed into a potent fuel, sharpening her mind, stripping away any fear of failure. She was no longer the overlooked daughter. She was an independent force, armed with unparalleled insight and a burning desire to prove her worth. The stage was set for a confrontation, not of personalities, but of contrasting philosophies, and Sabine was ready to play her hand. The meeting with Elias Thorne was not easily secured. Sabine's reputation as Lehman's operations genius preceded her, but so did the scandalous whispers of her abrupt departure. Elias, a man of quiet authority, had seen many industry hopefuls, many ambitious schemers. He was skeptical, his expression a careful mask as Sabine walked into his Spartan, wood-paneled office. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. There was no bitterness in her voice, only a cold, clear precision as she laid out her findings, her analysis of Thorne Global Logistics' untapped potential, and, more pointedly, Lehman Logistics' systemic failings under its new leadership. She spoke of algorithms, of supply chain optimization, of predictive analytics with a passion that Elias had rarely witnessed. She didn't just present data. She wove a narrative of missed opportunities and impending crises, her finger tracing lines on complex charts she had personally drawn. Elias, initially reserved, found himself leaning forward, captivated. Her understanding of his own company's intricate operations was unnerving, as if she had been an unseen auditor for years. She spoke of specific inefficiencies in Thorne's shipping routes, identified alternative suppliers he hadn't considered, and outlined a radical new approach to inventory management that promised to cut costs by a staggering percentage. She exposed the hidden vulnerabilities in Lehman's new flash over substance strategy, predicting their impending logistical breakdowns with chilling accuracy. She wasn't selling herself as a victim, she was presenting herself as a solution, the only solution. Mr. Thorne, Sabine stated, her voice steady, her eyes unwavering. Your company is solid, but it is standing still while the industry moves forward. Lehman Logistics is crumbling from within, masked by a facade. I can make Thorne Global Logistics not just competitive, but dominant. I can transform your entire operation, leverage your existing strengths, and exploit every weakness of our mutual competitor. Elias stared at her, a profound silence filling the room. He was a man who trusted numbers, and Sabine's numbers were irrefutable. But beyond the data, he saw something else. A raw, unyielding intelligence, a profound dedication that transcended mere ambition. He saw a genius who had been betrayed, and a rare opportunity for his company. He had always admired Sabine's father, and knew the quiet brilliance that underpinned Lehman Logistics' success. To know that she was the true force, and that she was now available, was a revelation. It was an unconventional risk, a move that would undoubtedly shock the industry, but Elias Thorne was a pragmatist above all else. He recognized true value when he saw it, unadorned by ego or public fanfare. He picked up a pen, a slow smile spreading across his face. Miss Lehman, he said, his voice deep and thoughtful, I believe you, but you won't just be transforming my operation. I want you to take my operation. I'm nearing retirement myself. I've been looking for someone with your vision, your integrity. I'm prepared to offer you full control. Not just a position, but ownership. Let's not just compete with Lehman, let's redefine the industry. Sabine felt a tremor of shock, then a surge of exhilaration. This was not merely an alliance. It was an act of profound trust, an affirmation of her worth more potent than any board appointment. Elias Thorne, the perceptive authority figure, had seen the hidden gem. He was offering her not just a second chance, but a canvas upon which to paint her masterpiece. The game had just changed. The news reverberated through the logistics world like a seismic tremor. Sabine Lehman, the ghost of Lehman Logistics, had reemerged as the new CEO and majority shareholder of Thorne Global Logistics. The industry buzzed with speculation, disbelief, and a grudging respect. Sabine, however, paid no mind to the noise. She was already at work, a quiet whirlwind of controlled intensity. Her first weeks at Thorn Global were a masterclass in swift, decisive transformation. The existing team, initially wary and skeptical of this quiet, intense woman who had seemingly appeared from nowhere, soon found themselves swept up in her relentless drive. She didn't shout or dictate. She explained, she demonstrated, she inspired. She conducted exhaustive audits, not just of processes but of people, quickly identifying talent that had been stifled by Thorne's previous caution. She was a leader who led by doing, immersing herself in every department, understanding every nuance. Within weeks, the staid Thorne Global offices hummed with a new energy. Old, inefficient software was ripped out and replaced by bespoke systems Sabine had designed in her months of exile. Manual processes that had defined Thorne for decades were automated. Legacy supply chains were meticulously re-engineered, cutting transit times and costs that analysts had previously deemed untouchable. She introduced dynamic routing algorithms, leveraging real-time data to optimize every single shipment, a concept that was still years away from widespread adoption in most of the industry. Her vision was not just incremental improvement, it was revolutionary. The contrast with Lehman Logistics, under Alexa's superficial reign, grew starker by the day. While Sabine was optimizing cross-docking operations and implementing AI-driven predictive maintenance for their fleet, Alexa was busy commissioning a new line of eco-friendly uniforms and hosting influencer events at their main warehouse, turning it into a photo-op backdrop rather than a functioning logistical hub. Lehman's internal reports, once meticulously compiled by Sabine, now glossed over growing inefficiencies, attributing delays to unforeseen market fluctuations or industry-wide challenges. Customers, however, noticed. They noticed the slower response times, the higher error rates, the creeping increases in costs. Sabine, meanwhile, was silently building a fortress of efficiency and innovation at Thorne Global. She fostered a culture of relentless problem-solving, empowering her teams to think creatively, to challenge the status quo. She invested heavily in employee training, knowing that the strength of her enterprise lay in the collective expertise of her people. She was transforming Thorne Global from a reputable but predictable player into an agile, technologically advanced powerhouse. Her meticulous preparations, born from betrayal and forged in solitude, were now bearing fruit. She wasn't just competing, she was redefining the very terms of engagement. The silence that had once shrouded her genius was now replaced by the growing hum of a machine she had built, a machine designed for one purpose: to reclaim her rightful place at the pinnacle of the industry she had always served. The stage was set for the true test. The market began to whisper, then to shout. The industry analysts, initially dismissive of Thorne Global's new direction, watched in growing astonishment as their performance metrics soared. Sabine Lehman, the name once synonymous with quiet competence at Lehman Logistics, was now synonymous with disruptive innovation at Thorne Global. The first salvo was subtle, almost imperceptible. Thorne Global began bidding on contracts with surgical precision, leveraging their newly optimized cost structures to undercut Lehman Logistics by mere percentages, enough to win, but not enough to seem like an aggressive attack. These were smaller contracts at first, pilot projects, but they were executed flawlessly, with unheard-of efficiency and precision. Customers, tired of Lehman's burgeoning delays and vague excuses under Alexa's leadership, started taking notice. One major contract, a significant shipping deal for a global electronics manufacturer, had been a Lehman stronghold for years. Sabine, armed with her proprietary routing algorithms and real-time tracking capabilities, presented a proposal that not only offered a 15% cost reduction, but promised delivery times that were simply unattainable by Lehman's current, bogged-down system. The electronics manufacturer, after an exhaustive review, shifted their allegiance. The news sent a minor tremor through Lehman Logistics. Alexa, immersed in planning a Logistics of the Future virtual summit, dismissed it as an anomaly, a one-off loss due to an aggressive competitor. "We focus on brand value, not just margins," she declared in a board meeting, her voice betraying a hint of nervousness. The board members, many of whom had voted against Sabine, shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent, clinging to the belief that Alexa's PR-driven strategy would eventually pay off. But the losses continued. One after another, contracts began to slip away, not with a bang but with a quiet, insidious erosion. Thorne Global wasn't just undercutting, they were outperforming Lehman in every measurable way. Sabine's team, fueled by her quiet but powerful leadership, operated with a singular focus, executing every task with military precision. They were a well-oiled machine, lean, efficient, and utterly ruthless in their pursuit of excellence. The dramatic irony was palpable. The company Sabine had built was now being systematically dismantled by the very genius they had cast aside. Alexa's carefully curated social media image of a thriving, innovative company began to crack under the weight of mounting operational failures. Customer complaints, once managed quietly by Sabine, now spiraled into public grievances. The news channels, initially captivated by Alexa's influencer status, began to report on Lehman Logistics' plummeting stock prices and the growing instability within their ranks. The once unquestioned dominance of Lehman Logistics was now a fragile illusion, exposed for its hollow core. Sabine, observing from afar, felt no triumph, only a quiet, resolute satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about proving a fundamental truth, that merit, hard work, and genuine expertise would always prevail over superficiality and misplaced entitlement. The war had escalated, and Sabine Lehman, the overlooked virtuoso, was just getting started. The mounting losses at Lehman Logistics could no longer be dismissed. Panic began to ripple through the boardroom. Major clients were defecting, their long-standing loyalty eroding in the face of Thorne Global's undeniable efficiency and cost savings. The once impressive revenue charts for Lehman Logistics now showed a steady, alarming decline. Alexa, initially dismissive, now found herself constantly on the defensive, her influencer charm utterly useless against hard numbers and furious clients. Her carefully curated social media posts began to feel painfully out of touch, a stark contrast to the grim reality unfolding within the company. The board, finally waking from their complacent stupor, demanded answers. They grilled Alexa, who stammered excuses about unprecedented market volatility and aggressive competitor tactics, never quite grasping the fundamental flaw in her own leadership. She tried to pivot, proposing extravagant new advertising campaigns and flashy tech demos that offered no real solutions to the deep-seated logistical problems plaguing the company. Sabine, meanwhile, accelerated her strategy. She didn't just target Lehman's existing clients, she began to innovate in areas Lehman had never even considered. Thorne Global launched a revolutionary same-day regional delivery service for e-commerce, something Lehman lacked the infrastructure or agility to replicate. They invested in green logistics, utilizing optimized electric fleets and sustainable packaging solutions, attracting eco-conscious clients who had previously found no suitable partner. Each move was a calculated blow, striking at Lehman's weaknesses, exposing their technological stagnation and lack of forward-thinking leadership. The Lehman family, once so proud of their legacy, watched in horror as their empire crumbled. Sabine's father, now an increasingly frail man, expressed his profound regret and shame, privately sending Sabine a letter, a heartfelt plea for understanding that she read with a complex mix of sorrow and vindication. The board, desperate, finally turned to what they thought was their trump card, an attempted acquisition of a smaller, innovative logistics startup that could potentially plug some of their technological gaps. But Sabine, ever the strategist, had anticipated this. Thorne Global Logistics, under her direction, outbid Lehman, securing the startup and cementing their technological lead even further. The frustration within Lehman Logistics reached a fever pitch. Department heads resigned, key talent migrated to Thorne Global, drawn by Sabine's reputation and the promise of genuine innovation. Alexa, overwhelmed and out of her depth, became increasingly erratic, lashing out at her remaining staff, her perfectly coiffed exterior cracking to reveal a scared, insecure young woman. The company was in disarray, a ship adrift in a storm, with a captain who knew nothing of navigation. Sabine had not only matched her former company, she had utterly eclipsed it. Her triumph was not loud or boastful. It was a quiet, undeniable victory born of strategic brilliance and an unshakable belief in her own worth. The industry watched, mesmerized by the unfolding drama, as the invisible architect systematically dismantled the empire that had once cast her aside, piece by meticulously planned piece. The day came when the Lehman Logistics Board, utterly broken and facing imminent collapse, requested a meeting with Sabine Lehman. It was not a negotiation, it was a surrender. The setting was neutral ground, a grand conference room in a downtown Hamburg hotel, far from the hallowed halls of Lehman Logistics, now a shadow of its former self. Sabine arrived, not with a triumphant procession, but with a single, calm advisor, her posture regal, her eyes holding the quiet strength of a woman who had walked through fire and emerged unburnt. The Lehman board members, once so dismissive, looked haggard, their faces etched with desperation. Alexa, pale and trembling, sat beside them, her once vibrant presence diminished to a fragile flicker. The air was thick with unspoken apologies, with the bitter taste of regret. The board chairman, the same man who had announced Alexa's appointment, cleared his throat, his voice barely a whisper. "Sabine," he began, "we were wrong. Terribly wrong. We misjudged everything. Lehman Logistics it's failing. We've lost too much. We've come to ask for your help." He couldn't quite bring himself to say, "Take us back." Sabine listened, her expression unreadable. She felt no rush of vindication, no desire to gloat, only a profound sense of inevitability. "Help?" she echoed, her voice clear and resonant, filling the silent room. "You chose a facade over foundation. You chose image over integrity. You chose someone with no understanding of logistics to lead a logistics company. And you cast aside the very person who built it, brick by painstaking brick." Her words were not accusatory, but delivered with the detached clarity of a surgeon diagnosing a terminal illness. "Lehman Logistics," she continued, "is not simply failing because of competition. It is failing because it lost its soul. It lost its understanding of what it truly is. A machine, a finely tuned network, not a brand. The cost of that mistake is incalculable." Alexa finally spoke, her voice thin, raw with defeat. "Sabine, please. I never meant, I didn't know what I was doing." I was overwhelmed. Sabine turned her gaze to her niece, and for a moment, a flicker of something akin to pity crossed her face. "No, Alexa," Sabine stated, her voice softer but no less firm. "You didn't, and that was the problem. Leadership isn't a popularity contest. It's a profound responsibility. It demands knowledge, foresight, and an unwavering commitment to the work, not just the spotlight." The chairman, desperate, presented their final, humiliating offer. "Sabine, we are prepared to offer you the CEO position again. Full control. Whatever you want. Just save Lehman Logistics." Sabine paused, a long, heavy silence stretching between them. She looked at the faces around the table, the men who had once held her fate in their hands, now utterly powerless. Her eyes then swept over Alexa, a young woman who had been thrust into a role she was profoundly unsuited for, a pawn in a game of corporate superficiality. "I built Thorn Global Logistics into what it is today," Sabine finally declared, her voice resonating with power and conviction. "It is the future. It is where innovation thrives, where true value is recognized. I don't need to save Lehman Logistics. I have already built something superior." She rose, and the board members involuntarily flinched, their hope extinguished. "I will consider a merger," she stated, her terms clear. "But it will be Thorn Global Logistics acquiring Lehman, not the other way around." Your company will be integrated into ours, its assets leveraged, its employees given the opportunity to join a company that values true competence. Your current leadership structure will be entirely dismantled. It was not a negotiation, but an ultimatum. A final, resounding triumph of substance over superficiality, a cathartic reclamation of her rightful place at the pinnacle of an industry she was born to lead. The silence that followed was one of absolute, undeniable surrender. Sabine Lehman's ascent from overlooked operations manager to industry titan was complete. Thorne Global Logistics, now incorporating the valuable physical assets and remaining capable personnel of the acquired Lehman Logistics, became the undisputed leader in the global shipping industry. The integration was swift and decisive. True to her word, Sabine systematically dismantled the old, inefficient structures of Lehman, retaining only the elements that contributed to genuine value. Many of the board members who had dismissed her were quietly retired or replaced. Alexa Richter, stripped of her CEO title, retreated from public life, a stark lesson learned about the ephemeral nature of influencer fame when put to the test of real-world leadership. Sabine, however, felt no personal triumph in her niece's downfall, only a quiet, almost mournful understanding of the path Alexa had been forced down. Under Sabine's guidance, Thorne Global Logistics didn't just recover, it innovated beyond recognition. It pioneered fully automated warehouses powered by AI, developed drone delivery systems for remote areas, and established ethical, sustainable supply chains that became the gold standard for the entire sector. Her success wasn't merely about dominance, it was about elevating the entire industry, pushing the boundaries of what was possible in logistics. She remained the same quiet, focused leader, driven by a passion for efficiency and a profound respect for the integrity of work. But now, she was seen. She was recognized, not just within her company, but globally, as the unparalleled genius she had always been. Her story became a legend within the industry, a powerful reminder that true worth cannot be suppressed forever, and that the quiet architects often build the most enduring empires. Sabine Lehman, who once moved through warehouses like a phantom, now commanded an empire, her vision shaping the very flow of global commerce. Her journey proved that while external validation can be fleeting and misguided, intrinsic worth, when coupled with relentless dedication, will always find its way to the surface. It was a victory not just for her, but for competence, for integrity, and for every individual who has ever felt their quiet brilliance overshadowed. So, what does Sabine Lehman's incredible journey tell us about our own lives? It's a powerful testament to the fact that true value, deep expertise, and unwavering dedication can never be permanently dismissed, no matter how loud the noise of superficiality or how cruel the sting of betrayal. Her story reminds us that sometimes being underestimated is the greatest gift, the very catalyst that forces us to forge our own path, to build something so undeniable that the world has no choice but to see it. It shows us the profound truth. Success isn't just about reaching a destination, it's about the relentless pursuit of excellence, even when no one is watching, even when the odds seem impossibly stacked against you. What hidden talent do you possess that the world hasn't fully recognized? What quiet genius within you is waiting for its moment to shine? Remember, the greatest architects often work in silence, and the most powerful movements begin with a single, determined step forward. Share this story, comment below, and remind someone today that their worth is not determined by external validation, but by the fire within their own spirit.